Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're having an excellent JNUC. So we've got George from Galide that's going to talk to us all today. I'd ask you to save your questions until the end, and I'll come around with a mic if there's any. But yeah, George.
Well, thank you very much. And so 33.6 million. 33,600,000 devices. That's how many assets were being managed using Jamf as of the end of Q2. So I don't know, I just did some back of the envelope, back of the napkin math, taking into account Jamf's 80,000 customers, including all of you. You know, the mix of iOS and macOS devices. And so what I'm estimating is that the current residual value of those devices is somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $25 billion. So today, we're going to talk about how you can maximize the value of that hardware. So I'm George Weisgerber, VP of Partnerships and Procurement with Galide. And you might ask, who's Galide? Well, Galide, we're a fully integrated device buyback and recycling. You know what, actually? Sorry, before I tell you about Galide, I'd like to share a little story. Has anyone here read the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek? All right, well, if you have, you might have heard this already, but it goes back to the 1980s. There were a group of American auto executives from one of the big three automakers. I think it was GM, if I'm not mistaken. And they were trying to figure out, trying to understand why Japanese cars were just so much more efficient. All right, so what did they do? They flew to Japan to visit a Japanese car factory. And so as they walked the assembly line, everything was pretty much the same as it is in America. There was a station to weld the chassis. There was a station to install the engine, another to put the doors on their hinges. But something was missing. See, in the US, a line worker would take a rubber mallet and tap the edges of the door to ensure it fit properly. But in Japan, for some reason, that job just didn't seem to exist. So one of the American CEOs, he asked his Japanese guide, at what point do you make sure the doors fit properly? And their Japanese guide looked at them and smiled, and he replied, we make sure it fits when we design it. See, in Japan, they didn't wait for a problem before finding a solution. They engineered the outcome from the very beginning. They started with the why. And at Galide, we design all of our solutions following the same methodology. First the why, then the how, and finally the what. So what is Galide's why? Well, our purpose is to help you maximize the value of your organization's age technology, but this next part is very important. As securely, sustainably, and seamlessly as possible. Call it the 3 S's. For some reason, I don't know, good things always seem to come in threes. So every single one of Galide's processes, whether it be logistics, operations, repairs, or re-commerce, is built to ensure these 3 S's. Once again, security, sustainability, and a seamless experience for our customers. But now you might be thinking, all right, that's fine, but I signed up for a session about maximizing the value of hardware. What does any of that have to do with this? That's a great question. Well, I'm not sure if any of you attended DEF CON 32, the hacker convention in August out in Vegas. Well, if you did, you might have seen a presentation from Matt Bryant. He's a security engineer for Snap Inc. And he gave a presentation that was pretty interesting, but also quite concerning. See, he employed tools like Cloudflare workers and some reverse engineered APIs And by doing that, he was able to bypass rate limiting and scrape over 50 million listings from eBay, JNUC, and other online sites. Now, what was he looking for? Well, he utilized OCR, optical character recognition, to identify retired corporate IT assets that were being sold on these sites. What did he find? He found prototype iPhones and devices belonging to organizations like CVS, Intuit, Lockheed Martin, Hertz, even the FDA. One big find was an Apple time capsule device that was actually from an Apple employee clearance sale. All right, so you might think, well, what's the big deal? I mean, isn't that a good thing that these devices are being remarketed in the circular economy? That's better than them ending up in landfills. And I'm sure you're thinking, these devices were wiped, right? They didn't have any data on them. Well, unfortunately, that wasn't the case. These devices still contained data, such as confidential emails, internal credentials, internal emails, bank account information, passport ID scans, even proprietary code for software. See, Galide, we ensure that doesn't happen. And the reason for that is because we always put data security first and foremost. It's part of our why. Every single device we touch goes through a rigorous process to ensure that every last bit of data is destroyed. Our ADISA-compliant process supports over 18 different wipe protocols, including NIST 888, DoD 5220, even Germany's Visitor protocol, and I don't know if anyone speaks German, but it's virtual, I can't say it, but it translates to classified IT policies. But we don't just stop there. We have multiple checks and balances built into our QMS, our quality management systems. And that includes random inspections at our facilities conducted by third-party independent auditors. Now that covers devices that can be wiped logically. But what about those that can't be wiped with software? Like maybe there's a defect, the device won't turn on. Or those where the SSD can't be removed, like every MacBook made, I think, since, 2016? So in those cases, Galide employs physical destruction. So regardless of the make, the model, the form factor, or the condition of the device, we make sure data recovery is impossible. So what I recommend is before working with any buyback partner, they're probably going to send you a proposal, a buyback offer, or maybe an MSA, an agreement. So what I recommend, is searching, doing Control F, and by the way, speaking of Mac OS commands, if you stop by our booth, we're giving out these cool stickers that have all the Mac OS commands on them, and they don't leave no residue, so they're not going to impact the resale value of your devices. Sorry to deviate, but I would search for the words limitation of liability. And what you'll find is many vendor agreements, they cap their damages due to gross negligence to as little as like $10,000 or $20,000. Some will limit it to the buyback or replacement value, and that's perfectly fine in terms of making sure you get something happen to the devices, you get back what the residual value of those devices, but it's really a small pittance compared to the legal consequences, the fines, and reputational nightmare your organization could face due to improper data destruction. Just ask Morgan Stanley. They were fined by the SEC, the Treasury Department, and multiple states for giving their used IT assets to, and this is a quote from the SEC's report, a vendor with no experience or expertise in data destruction. So we're focused on getting you the most with the most value back for your devices, but you have to remember we're not just a buyback vendor. Galide is a certified ITAD. ITAD is an acronym for IT Asset Disposition. We specialize in data destruction, so data security was incorporated into our buyback program from the very beginning. It's part of our why. So at Galide, you're not going to find any of this language written into our buyback agreements, proposals, or terms of service. We also have a cybersecurity policy with Lloyd's of London that covers us for $5 million. So now we've covered data security. So let's move on to the second S. Does anyone remember the second S that's incorporated into all of Galide's Ys? All right, well, it's right there. It's sustainability. And our founder, Kizzer, who he's here today, he'll tell you that sustainability is in his blood. And that's the truth. Kizzer's family's business, they incorporated sustainability and the local and the circular economy into their business model decades before ESG was even a thing. They had a factory that produced garments and textiles from containers filled of clothing that would otherwise end up in landfills. And clothing is one of the fastest growing waste streams on the planet. But there's one category of waste that's growing faster than that, and that's electronic waste, e-waste. So Kizzer, our founder, he's always been passionate about extending the life cycle of electronics. I had the pleasure of having dinner at his family's house, and I think his mother said he was soldering circuit boards when he was as young as like 7 or 8 years old. And tomorrow, Joanne from my team, she's going to be hosting a brain date with Kizzer, where they're going to be offering tips and tricks for how you could repair Apple devices. So I definitely recommend checking it out. But when Kizzer was 17, while he was studying mechanical engineering at Texas Tech, he decided he loves repairing things, so he applied for a job at Geek Squad at Best Buy. And they rejected him. But he wasn't deterred. He wound up starting a side hustle, repairing and selling used iPhones to his friends and classmates. Now, 2 years later, and again, he's only a teenager, he heard about pallets full of used and broken Dell laptops being sold by one of the largest upstream IT asset disposition vendors in the country. So he called them up, and he made an appointment to go check out the devices. So he flew up from Houston to Illinois, and they looked at him. They said, "Who is this kid?" They didn't take him seriously. Well, the next day, he returned with a cashier's check for $50,000, and the rest is history. He wound up leasing a store in Houston, Texas, the first of 5 locations, specializing in the repair and resale of Apple products. From there, he acquired a warehouse and built all the processes and systems necessary to launch Galide. This is over the course of 10 years, a fully integrated IT asset disposition solution, and we're certified by RIOS, ISO, and CIRI. And CIRI is the governing body that issues the R2v3 certification. And that's the gold standard for secure and sustainable recycling. All right, so we've covered data security. We've covered sustainability. This third one's hard, so I don't expect anyone to remember, but there is one more pillar built into all of our processes. And that was, oh, thank you. Great. That was just, thank you. That's correct, seamlessness. So our goal is to provide a seamless customer experience, first driven by software, and anyone who's worked with me or my team, they'll tell you our SLA is to respond to anything, whether it's a request for a quote or a customer success question within 24 hours, but generally it's immediate. I pride ourselves on how responsive we are. But we do have customers who've expressed that they would love some automation. So we decided that if Galide was going to build a portal or MDM integration to help streamline the buyback process, that it had to be with Jamf. We decided that from the very beginning. So I don't know, was anyone at JNUC in Austin last year? Oh, great. Okay, so some of you may have remembered us. You may have stopped by our booth. Our product team was on site giving demos and, more importantly, soliciting feedback from users like you about what could help, what we could do to help make the buyback process more seamless. So at the time, Galide was the only Apple buyback partner with a pre-built Jamf integration, but I'm really excited to see that several other Jamf partners have since followed suit, because this is a great thing, because pricing transparency and automation, that's good for all customers and the ITAD industry as a whole. So today I'm just going to go into some new features that we're adding to our portal. But first, a quick recap and a little demo of our current instance. So in terms of getting started, it's pretty straightforward. You set up an API role for Galide, and the only privilege sets required are read computers and read mobile devices. There are also some optional privilege sets, which if you want to utilize some other features, which I'll get into in a moment. But for a regular buyback solution, that's all you need. All right, so now you've created an API role for Galide. You log into our secure portal, and you connect Jamf. You can also configure single sign-on. Our SAML 2.0 integration supports Okta and Trust and pretty much all major IDPs. So now once Jamf is connected, now all you have to do is go to our devices dashboard. And from here, you're going to have a list of all your assets, and you're going to have filters that you could utilize. Currently, on our current instance, the filters include model, processor, RAM, and device status. So you can check off those devices that you want to quote for, and then just click Get Quote. And then within 24 hours, if you go to the quote management page, you'll have an offer for those devices. And then if you like what you see, just click Approve to begin the recovery process. Now, some of Galide's customers, they still love working with us and customer success and emailing us for quotes, or we're always happy to, work with you. But the ones who we have many customers who we have onboarded to our portal who are using our Jamf API integration, they love it. So the first thing that they really like is that they don't have to download a CSV of the devices that they want to retire and email them to us just to get a quote. Another popular feature, and again, this is an optional feature, but if any of you ever went through a buyback process before, you know that in order to get value back for your devices, they have to be released from Jamf and ABM. So another feature that we've added is, and this is optional, if after we've processed the devices you want to release them, you can just check that off and kind of saves you that extra step. But from the very beginning, our team had much bigger plans. So excited to announce, if any of you are currently using our portal, that we are giving our UI a facelift and that'll be launched in December. And now we're going to add a lot more filters. So you'll be able to filter by supported OS. You can filter by chip type. You can, so then that way you can have a group of devices you want to retire. But what's really exciting now is you'll be able to see what the potential value is of those devices immediately. So that kind of gives you an idea of the residual value, and you don't have to wait for a quote. Now, I was really hoping that we could make this a live feature where you can just instantly see how much we can pay you for those devices. But one of the things that Galide really prides ourselves on is that we guarantee all our buyback quotes. We'll tell you what you can expect to be paid, grade A through F, and we stand by that. And for that reason, for now, we will give you the potential value, the estimated value, but it will still be 24 hours for you to get an actual quote that's guaranteed. So now once you've clicked Accept to the buyback offer, you're going to have two options. So first, you can pick self-ship. So that's where we'll send you boxes with packaging for you to send them in FedEx, or if you don't want to wait for us to send boxes, we connect to FedEx's API, and you can just download prepaid shipping labels. So that's if you want to ship in the devices. The other option is what we call a white glove pickup. So that's where Galide, our team will come on site, and we'll collect everything for you. That saves you the work of packing things up, putting on labels. It also gives you an opportunity if you'd like to get rid of any e-waste, because as I said, Galide, we're just not an Apple buyback partner, we're an ITAD. So for instance, if you have any old monitors, UPS, cables, cords, AV equipment that you also need collected, we'll be happy to remove those during the white glove pickup. And we also are not Mac agnostic, so if you have Windows devices or Chrome devices, we're happy to accept those too. And then, of course, we can't manage those through the integration, though. So now you've shipped in your devices, you've had them collected by Galide's White Gloves logistics team, and now they've been inspected, they've been audited, and then wiped either logically or physically. So what's next? So here we give you 3 options. One, you could either get a cash payment, which is either ACH or paper check. For some reason, a lot of the districts I've worked with seem to prefer paper checks. You could also pick an Apple gift card, so you can put those funds right back into acquiring new equipment, or you can donate to the nonprofit of your choice, in which case Galide will add an additional 5%. Okay, now if you remember Galide's why, we're more than just a buyback device reseller. We're a certified ITAD. So we've got you covered when it comes to GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. So let's just say you wound up doing a buyback with Galide, you're happy, you got the funds, but now, I don't know, 6 months go by, and your CISO or someone from your InfoSec team calls, and they say, because they're doing a SOC 2 audit, and they say, hey, where's this? Let me see that certificate of destruction for that MacBook that you retired with Galide. Or maybe your finance team reaches out, and they want to know, they're working on depreciation or end-of-year reconciliation. They want to know how much was recouped for a specific device. Well, now you'll just go to our downloads page, and you'll be able to download that information. You'll be able to have an archive of all those artifacts, which we'll keep for up to 7 years. Now we've kind of went through Galide's portal. I just would love to go through some just best practices that you can use overall to lower TCO, total cost of ownership, and maximize value. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but because we're all, love Mac, but studies have shown time and time and again, studies by Jamf, Forrester Research, even a study by IBM, shows that Macs cost less to operate and service than Windows devices. So you're already ahead of the game when it comes to maximizing value. And a big part of that, in addition to the operational costs, is the fact that Apple devices have the least depreciation and the highest residual value. So one best practice you can do is establish a structured refresh cycle, usually around 3 to 4 years. Now, it's hard to predict future depreciation because there are anomalies, like there was times like during the supply chain shortage, during the pandemic, where we actually saw sometimes device resale values went up on certain devices. But historically, Apple devices tend to really hold their value within those first 3 to 4 years, because there's a lot of common repairs that we've seen, like FlexGate, sticky keyboards, a lot LCDs with white spots. A lot of these tend to occur right around year 4. So, like for instance, we looked at the data, and MacBook Pros depreciate an average of 25 to 35% from the middle of year 3 to the middle of year 4. So that's the sweet spot if you want to really maximize value recovery. Another thing to do is, data has shown that Macs with base specs tend to hold their residual value than those with more RAM and storage. Now, obviously, your goal is to make sure your employees, your users, have the tools they need to do their job. So in no way would we ever recommend that you deprive that application or software developer of the power they need to do their jobs. But let's just say someone in customer success or sales, maybe they don't need that much computing power, and by starting with procurement and buying baseline specs, you lower your upfront costs and will maintain a higher percentage in terms of residual value. And obviously, you could do this by creating smart groups. Now, we didn't get to attend the keynote, but you can do this using AI to really identify which user groups need which specs. There's also usage monitoring. Poor battery health, that can significantly reduce the residual value you're going to get back on a device. So we recommend you get it out of your fleet once the battery health drops below 90%. So you can create smart groups based on battery health or cycle count extension attributes. And one example, I was speaking to someone here, they said that if you create a group for devices where the battery condition is service recommended or the cycle count exceeds a certain threshold, it's kind of a good way to make sure that you're getting these out of your fleet and you're making data-driven decisions in terms of when to replace them. Rolling device upgrades. A lot of times, companies just wait and do a across-the-fleet refresh at one time. One, it's easier logistically and easier for your team to do it, to implement a staggered upgrade process where devices are replaced in batches. It also allows you, smooths out costs in terms of procurement, but also ensures that your organization always has devices with strong resale value. And this last one's a big one, especially for schools. I was just speaking to someone from Otter Business, and he was sharing the statistics in terms of after when schools refresh, if they use protective, if they use device protection, that they would basically had increased the residual value at the time of retirement by something along the lines of 50%. We've seen that whenever we get devices from, especially this is a lot applies to schools, but also healthcare and any industries, but specifically on iOS devices and iPads, we've seen that when schools are using device protection, there's mostly grade B's and C's and not as many D's and F's. And we've also talked about Apple Care Plus. I know schools, this offers a lot of benefits where you can cover up to 2 incidences of accidental damage. Again, this is just based on the feedback I've gotten from the IT leaders that I've spoken to. Most in enterprise, I've heard say that they don't feel that Apple Care justifies its cost in an enterprise environment. Now, also timing. It's interesting that Apple products, so they tend to depreciate the most in June and July. And why is this? A lot of this ties back to education, because at the end of the school year, that's when most school districts are decommissioning their devices. So that creates a glut of an increase in supply of iPads on the secondary market. So what we've actually found is that in some cases, the buyback value would be higher in September than it was a few months earlier. One study showed iPads depreciating as much as 19% from January to July. So one thing about Galide, we monitor this closely, so we can provide you guidance in terms of optimal timing, and that's something we want to eventually be able to incorporate into our portal, where we can kind of really give you advice in terms of looking at our data from repairs, looking at our data from resale, as to the best time to retire your devices. And then again, there's the cost-benefit analysis for repairs. So since 2018, Apple's been pairing screens and other parts with IC, integrated chips. And this has actually caused an increase in repairs because we can no longer swap out parts from broken machines. So we found that a lot of common issues, I think I mentioned this earlier, flex state, white spots on LCDs, keyboard issues, tend to happen after 40 to 48 months. So that's, once again, another benefit of implementing a formal refresh cycle. Include accessories. If you're going to be getting, especially a lot of enterprise environments where you have remote users, a lot of times when they refresh, you send them a new device that includes the chargers, but you may not ask for them to send back in those accessories. And now, I mean, look, if you look at the MagSafe 3 charging blocks, I think separately they sell for $99, and the cables, if you add in the cables, you're looking at $150. Now, we don't deduct that amount for missing accessories, that's the MSRP, but regardless, it will still reduce the residual value. So we've covered the why, the how, and the what. Galide's Jamf API integration can do to help you maximize the value of your organization's hardware. So I'd love to hear from some of you as to what your why is. Why do you care about maximizing value, and what's important to you in terms of buyback? So a few more slides, but I wanted to see, does anyone have any questions or want to share your why? Okay, so one thing, if you do check out, we posted on the Galide blog a story about a lot of times IT from, the C-suite looks at IT as nothing more than a cost center, meaning IT keeps devices running, they make sure employees have what they need to do their job, they keep networks secure, but IT is not a revenue-generating department. So there's a lot of opportunities we talked about in that blog post on how you can kind of illustrate IT's value to the larger organization. But one of them is, maximizing, value at the end of life. So I invite you, the Jamf Nation, to stop by our booth. You could speak with Kevin or Joanne from my team, and they'll be happy to kind of tell you any more about, we can give you a buyback quote for specific devices if you're interested, or tell you more about our process. Also, if you're interested in learning more about Mac repairs, Joanne's going to be hosting a brain date with Kizzer, our founder, tomorrow at 10:30. But yeah, does anyone have any questions about maximizing value? Any suggestions? Any best practices you want to share? Would love to hear from you. Oh yes. Oh, sorry.
Our mic is good too. I do have what you were saying, that I have my my school on a schedule.
Yes.
So when I took over this tech coordinator position, I took a look at our fleet of all devices, whether they're Macs or PCs, and I kind of look at when it was purchased, how it was being used, and I kind of created like a sliding scale to see like this bunch of devices will do this, this, this. So it kind of aligns to what we're saying. So it does work, but it's just a lot of work to do to get that going. But once you get it going, when you get your new devices, it makes it that much easier. But my question was, when the integration of Jamf and Galide, is that can you just do it right now?
Yeah, absolutely. If you come to our booth, we'll be happy to help you set it up. I mean, you could just do it now. If you just have to, we send you the documentation, the knowledge base, but you just basically have to create an API role for Jamf, for Galide, and then those two privilege sets, and then we can give you a login to our portal if you stop by the booth, and then that way, if you want to check off the devices that you're interested in decommissioning, we can have a quote for you within the 24 hours. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great question. And great best practice. It is true that it is extra work on the front end, but it seems like it's paid dividends and made it the process more seamless for you going forward. So that's great. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, great. Well, do appreciate your feedback. If anyone has any, oh yes, sir.
You mentioned the percentage drop off between middle of year 3 to middle of year 4. What is the percentage if it's way beyond that, like 4, 5, or 6?
Yeah, so it does eventually level out at around year 5, where you don't see as much depreciation. So it is between like 3 to 5 is where you get that drop, and then it's kind of incremental, like single, double digits, like around 10% a year. But the great thing with Galide, we don't, like for instance, we just had someone reaching out, saying, what about devices that are no longer supported, the OS is no longer supported, like Montgomery, or we just did a big decommissioning project for a school district, and they had MacBook Airs, I think they were 2015, and they only had like 128 gigabytes of RAM because it was like a base spec, but we were still able to get them a good amount of money back. So because there still is a secondary market. I mean, if you look at, you can just go on eBay or anything, and you'll see people are still buying 2014, and 2013 MacBooks for like $100 or something. So we're very focused on, and as I said, it's in our founder, this is their blood. It's all about kind of, we want to really stretch out the life of things. So we always will find markets for things, even not necessarily laptops. We had a call center where they had Jabra headsets, and it was a fleet of, they didn't need them anymore, but they're expensive, So we were able to get the money back, or even some IP phones, we can't always make it net positive, but we really do try for anything to make sure that you can recover value for it. Yeah.
The other question was around the guaranteed quote.
Yes.
Is that based on us assessing this condition based on criteria that you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our proposal is very transparent. So it will, and I should have actually added it to the slide. It'll have a description of the grading, A, B, C, D, F, and some of it will have to do with battery health. Most of it has to do with cosmetic condition of the devices, and it has photos so you can kind of see exactly what a grade A, B is. And then our team audits it. And when you get your final audit report, it will say specifically if there was an issue. It could say LCD not working, missing the F key. So it's very transparent. And so we give you an upfront quote that tells you what you would get A, B, C, D, F. Then we will tell you what we think the estimate would be based on your, like for instance, a school environment. Generally, we're going to see more grade C's and D's, whereas in a corporate environment, we're going to see more A's and B's. So we tell you what we estimate, and we actually give you what we call a guaranteed minimum. Then we have an estimated quote, and then we have the high quote. But we're always very transparent to say it's highly unlikely that all your devices are going to be A. It's almost never happens. Yeah. So, great. Any other questions? Yes.
Your chart showed from 3 years, 4 years, and beyond. What about 2?
So yeah, that's a great question. So because of our data, and we don't really, because most of the devices we get are at least 2 years of age, if that makes sense. So our internal data, we don't have that depreciation, but year 1 to year 2. We can pull what the residual value is as a % of the MSRP, but we don't really have that drop off 1, 2, and 3, only because we do get some clients with 2-year refreshes, but I would say that on average it's 3 or more. So the volume of devices we sell, most of them are at least that age. So, but good question. And we are trying to see if we can get that data because it is helpful. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, so I'd love to again hear about your why. And one of the things that we've been talking about is I'm just curious what, if any of you have done buyback before, how that works internally in terms of finance, because I've heard some teams say, oh, finance says these are fully depreciated assets and they don't want the funds, or do they go into a general pool, or do they go into your IT that could be respent? So we were thinking, one of the things, and again, this is just something that we were exploring, if there could be some type of marketplace where you could use those buyback funds if you wanted to put them towards a SaaS product, or put them towards, we were talking to the person from Otter with the cases, if you wanted to put them towards protective devices or something else. But that's why, again, we offer the Apple gift card. But just an idea, and that's why I'm always curious internally how it works with buyback at different organizations. Yeah. All right, great. All right, well, thank you very much, everyone, and look forward to seeing. If you stop by our booth, we have an Apple II. You may have seen that's been, that our team helped to bring back to life, and you can play Pac-Man or Oregon Trail. We also have, I think it was an iPhone 6 that we've taken apart if you want to see. Yeah, so we'll look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much.